Excellent. Well, hello and welcome. I'm glad everyone could join us this evening. Obviously, there is a lot of work to be done during the summer months as we plan for the fall of 2020, which is different than any other fall that I've worked in public education. We have divided up into a number of teams to work to prepare plans. This team is focused around family and community engagement. I want to make sure that we're reaching out to people during these summer months, that we're providing them with good information, and that, more so than a typical year, we're working in creative ways, to engage with them, because the fall, will look different, than previous falls. And I want to make sure that folks have the information that they need and an opportunity to share thoughts, ideas, questions, comments, suggestions, if they would like. To that end, I worked with Superintendent Fox Alter last week on Wednesday and Thursday to develop two forms. One form was sent out to families. The other form was sent out to teachers. And the idea behind the two forms was to get some feedback from folks as we develop plans to return to school. We developed the forms that were sent out before the state issued any formal guidance around the reopening of school, which is why, for the models that we shared, they were very broad, because our thinking was, that number one, we wouldn't waste time really working to develop complete plans that people aren't really interested in. So the models that came back with the most favorable ratings are now the ones that will really work to fine tune, based on the feedback from the community. And number two, we weren't really sure, what the Department of Health or Department of Education might say. So what I've been starting out each meeting doing is just giving folks a quick recap of the results, from the survey. And I think the superintendent is going to be doing that this evening. She's got a board meeting taking place right now. And she developed a report for the Board of Ed that she'll be sharing. And then obviously that information will be posted to the Board of Ed minutes and will be available on the district website. But I'll give you the sneak peek here and a specific look at the information from a high school perspective. So what I did with the results from the survey is I exported all of the results to an Excel spreadsheet, and then I filtered out anything that wasn't high school related. So when I share numbers with you this evening, they're numbers based on high school families, not families at the Bedford Road School. So in total, all three buildings, there were 926 responses to the survey. In terms of high school families, we were in the lead almost all weekend, and we got outpaced this afternoon. There were 438 responses from the Bedford Road School. There were 389 responses from the middle school, and there were 420 responses from Pleasantville High School. Now, in terms of parceling out just some different data points from those responses, there were 4 models that we asked people to rank. The first model was a full return to school for all students. That would be 100% of our student population, and a requirement that students wear masks when social distancing isn't possible. On a scale of 5 stars, the average rating for a high school parent was 3.2 stars. Wow. The second model was a hybrid model where students would attend either an AM session or a PM session. On a 5 star scale based on responses from high school parents, that model had a 3.0 rating.
Huh.
The third model was one that is a hybrid model where students would have a full day in and then a full day out. That model received a 3.1 star rating. So that was a little above the rating for the AM and the PM sessions. And the final model, which was the complete loser, was the e-learning, which I was hoping would be the complete loser, frankly. That had an average rating of 1.8 stars for high school families. So that was ranked the lowest, of all the options, that are on the table. And then obviously there are some concerns with each one of those options, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The other important data point that I wanted to share was around, whether or not families felt comfortable sending their students to school, if we adhere to all of the guidelines around health and safety. One of the most common responses we got on the open-ended question was that any response that families shared to this question is subject to change. So folks frequently said, this is how I feel on July 10th. It could be different on July 15th. It could be different on September 1st. It all depends upon what happens in the world between now and then. However, on July 13th, the numbers were as follows. 79% of the respondents from the high school indicated that they were likely to send their children to school. 16% of the respondents from the high school indicated that they were undecided about sending their child to school. And 5% indicated that they were unlikely to send their children to school. So I think the numbers in terms of the families who intend on sending their children back are good, which is something that I'm happy about because I was worried about having to develop multiple programs for significant portions of our student population. We will still probably work to develop more than one program for students who have extenuating circumstances and might need to be home. That's something we're going to continue to look at. But I was glad to hear that the vast majority of our families do intend to send their kids to school in September, barring any type of dramatic shift in the news and the infection rate. The governor yesterday, he set some pretty clear parameters for the opening of schools. He talked about a 5% infection rate, and if it was lower than that, a school could open. And then he talked about when a school would close. And what the governor shared is that, and that infection rate, by the way, for the opening is a 2-week average, so 14 days, not a single day. What he talked about in terms of a potential closure is he said if the rate exceeded 9% in I believe it was a 1 week for the spike, 9% in a 1 week period, then a district would have to close and engage in e-learning for a period of time. So that's something that folks in Westchester County will be certainly keeping an eye on in the coming months. If the opening of school was scheduled for tomorrow, I believe that we would probably qualify, based on, the current infection rate locally. The big question, and it's a variable, we don't know the answer to this, is what will happen with that infection rate, when schools open. I know that there are other countries in the world that have opened and they've had good results. It's not an apples to apples comparison because a lot of these countries are much smaller than we are. But I do think that there are things that we can learn from them and look to implement in our school. And my hope is that the work that we do together around scheduling,
80% of families will send their
instruction,
50,
and health and safety
5%.
will create a scenario where when we do open school,
If there's a
that
5%
students will be healthy
infection rate,
and that we will not have a peak or a
happened
spike
today,
in terms of our infection rate. Now, the models that I mentioned a few moments ago, the one area that I'm working on in terms of our models very closely, and I have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, is around room cleaning. And the reason that that's become a big concern is the AM/PM model among my Southern Westchester Principals Association cohort seems to be a popular model that people are looking at. But the problem is turning the building over in a quick way so that all the surfaces are clean when students arrive for instruction. So I'm going to be meeting with Steve Chamberlain tomorrow to determine what that looks like in terms of time. I don't know if it's a 30-minute turnaround, if it's a 60-minute turnaround, if it's a 90-minute turnaround, or if it's a 2-hour turnaround. The folks at Edgemont have a wonderful plan. I saw it, I was like, this looks great. And then I looked at the middle bar to see how long they had between their AM and their PM sessions, and it was only 30 minutes. He said, that's the one part I'm not sure of. And I think that might be the part that principal runs into the most trouble with, because my best guess is that you're certainly going to need more than 30 minutes, to turn over an entire building. So I will have more information about the viability of that AM/PM model tomorrow, based on the meeting that I have with Steve Chamberlain. As far as the other models go, the next highest rated model would be the alternating days. Would be the alternating days. The socially distanced and masks when feasible is one that we're talking about. Most area high schools are not looking at that model right now because they're trying to maintain social distance. So it looks like we're most likely looking at one of the hybrid models. So, my goal for this group was to discuss how we can engage more families during the summer months, what you think about additional surveys to kind of pull back some information or get some information, and then potentially scheduling some Zoom meetings. I was thinking periodically starting the first week in August to keep people informed of all the different updates and twists and turns associated with the fall 2020. So I'm kind of curious to hear what folks think about doing that type of work, or ideas or suggestions that you have. Tammy.
Oh, you said before, and I know there's some teachers on this committee who are also Pleasantville teachers. What was the feedback with teachers returning to school? Was it similar?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So the teachers, and I made this mistake before. Both of those forms look similar. So I just got to make sure I click the correct one. So there were 171 respondents for the teacher survey. That's a little more than 60% of the entire certified staff in the district. As far as the ratings go, their ratings were very similar to the ratings that the parents had. So they're with the exception of Model 1, a full return with masks, and limited social distancing. They rated that the lowest. And then the other two options that were rated by parents, they rated them in the same way. So the AM/PM session was rated highly, but the full day alternating was rated higher. So, with the exception of that full return, the comments were similar. In terms of whether or not they intended, let me read this question. Knowing that the school district will work to comply with all safety guidelines, how likely is it that you will return to work in the fall? 152 of the 171 respondents indicated it is likely. 2 of them indicated that it is unlikely, and 14 explained that they were undecided. Also, a lot like the parents, many of the teachers indicated that some of their responses to those questions do hinge upon what they currently know about the state of affairs in New York, and expressed concerns about things that have happened in other states where things have opened up more than they have here in New York.
Now, when you mentioned the AM PM that Edgemont was doing, are they changing the hours?
Yeah, so for Edgemont's AM PM, they run a 9-period day just like we do. So what they're doing there is they're running three periods in the morning, and they're going to be longer periods. They were supposed to be an hour each. And then the A group goes home. The B group would be coming in the afternoon and also doing 3 periods. Now, when the A group goes home, they get involved in e-learning during the afternoon. But what the Edgemont folks liked the most about their schedule that way is that students had an opportunity to see teachers every day. And that although they were only running 3 periods, the periods were longer, so it lent itself to different activities that you couldn't necessarily do if you tried to do an AM session at, let's say, 30 minutes a period and squeeze in more periods. Now, what they didn't account for in their model is they didn't account for cleaning rooms, which I think is going to be problematic when it gets to their superintendent level, because I just don't see how you're going to be able to turn over the rooms in 30 minutes, particularly given what the guidance document said yesterday about surfaces that are used by students during the day. So, I'm kind of interested to hear what, his name is Kyle, he actually lives here in town. I'm actually interested to hear what Kyle, comes back with, around, that scenario. And the other really common thing that I heard high school principals talk about is that they favored the AM PM model because it eliminated the need for them to figure out lunch. Because in most of those models, kids would come in, they would be in school till 11:30, they would go home, and then the students who came in would come in at about 12:30, and then they would go home. So I'm actually not so worried about lunch. I feel like there are ways to figure lunch out, in the building if kids are there. So that really wouldn't be a driving factor for me. But, we will see. And like I said, my conversation tomorrow with Mr. Chamberlain, who's our director of facilities, will give me a lot of information that I need about, whether or not a model like that would even be feasible. Because to your point, Tammy, the teacher contract traditionally does talk about a start of the day and an end of the day. So that would be something, if we had to deviate from that we would have to work on to create some type of memorandum of agreement around, potentially for the semester or the year, depending upon how long, this, pandemic persists. Oh, sorry, I muted you.
So is there, I know one concern was making sure that the kid, I know, I guess from talking to people, making sure that all their kids went to school on the same day. And that
cohorting. Yeah, so that's a whole interesting thing. And Andrew, if you've got any ideas, I know you work in a school, I'd love to hear from you. I'm trying to figure out cohorting and how I might best group students. I was speaking to somebody who runs a high school in Connecticut today, and they're doing it by English class because every student in every grade takes English. Many other principals are doing it by last name to keep siblings together. So, that's something I've been kind of thinking about, and I don't have an exact plan yet for that. But I'm open to any ideas, any and all. I love ideas. I love ideas.
What are the 3 classes that, like in Edgemont, that you'd be?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. So what they're doing there is over a 3-day cycle, they're sending kids to all 3 classes that they would ordinarily have. So their first in-person visit to the building on Monday would be for periods 1, 2, and 3. Their second in-person visit on Tuesday would be for courses periods 4, 5, and 6. And then their last visit on Thursday in that cycle would be for periods 7, 8, and 9.
Okay.
So they cycle through all 9 courses over the course of 3 days.
Are they in for music and art?
So for art, you can definitely do music based on the guidelines set forth by the Department of Health. That's going to be a much tougher thing to do in person. You know, we might be able to pull it off in the spring if we can get outside.
Will the school consider plastic shielding or plexiglass around the students so that they can do, I guess band would be more of a concern than anything, and chorus.
No, chorus,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Chorus is a big problem. too.
Band and orchestra, but orchestra is
Yeah.
probably not an issue. It's band instruments and then of chorus.
Well, Tammy, just to let you know, I mean, Tufts just told basically all the woodwind and all the obvious and all the singers and all the brass instruments, basically anything you have to blow into or sing, they are not allowed to use the music facility. In addition, the town of Medford has prohibited them from performing outside. So I don't know if New York State has any similar regulations around that too, or if they brought forth anything like that, but you know.
Well, I know that, you know, West Point for their band, they were able to put plexiglass, so I didn't know if that
It
was.
depends on our local health guidelines, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of those details that's going to be in the next State Department of Education set of guidelines that comes out. I mean, you know, I would love to offer students those opportunities in person, but those ones are going to be, you know, far more difficult to plan and coordinate than, you know, English, science, math, social studies, you know, our electives in the core areas, those types of things.
So what's going to happen with students that who maybe don't have, you know, with requirements that they have to do or enough?
For graduation requirements, what do you mean?
So like, I guess if you take chorus as, you know, your music requirement and you're not able to, I guess, have chorus.
Well, you may have it. We may have to run it. That may be an e-learning course or something that we find a different way to do. And I know that any requirement that we have locally would obviously, you know, is always flexible. And then as far as the state goes, you know, one of the things that I've noticed over the course of the last, 4 months is that certainly the state has been more than flexible, you know, with seat time, lab time, regents exams, course requirements. So I would anticipate, you know, that given everything that's happening, you know, in the world right now, that would be more than flexible with those types of things.
Joe, I have a question. So for this committee, what are you kind of looking for from us in terms of family engagement? Are you looking for family engagement over the process and communication over the process? Or are you looking more towards also when we get to the point of when we have plans in place, how are we then going to engage all the stakeholders, the students, the families, the faculty, the staff, the local community, and all of that? Because I do know that in these plans, they've laid out that they want you to have communication.
Yeah. I'll take C, both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we plan some opportunities, you know, for either surveys and some work early, and then we can do some ongoing meetings throughout the year.
I just have a quick, thank you, Rachel, because that was one of my questions too, because I was just concerned, like, what is my purpose here? Like, how exactly, like, I know for the surveys you had asked us, you know, to see to it kind of if we can tap the friends that we know. So I know that I sent it out to, I think like it was like 20 moms that I know, but then I'm like, most of those moms are really moms of like 10th graders who are going into 11th grade. And then there were a few who had 8th graders coming into 9th grade. But then I'm like, can we make it a little bit more strategic so that all the grade levels kind of like either has like, whether it be a point person or something, just to make it more effective. So as we're disseminating this information, and exactly what information are we supposed to be disseminating, being that everything is so still up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's been part of the big challenge, right? Is how do you make plans, do the things that we typically do, almost a year out, you know, in an environment where we don't have all the information that we need when we want it, right? So, you know, my thinking, for this group now is I'd like to hear about, would it be most effective if, I started to do a daily message? Would it be most effective if we, looked at scheduling, meetings, August 1st, August 8th, August 15th? What do you think might be the best way to engage, the community as we prepare to open schools?
One thing I would like is I'd like a grade level Zoom.
Yeah. And what specific information would you be looking for there?
Well, if we start them at the end of the month, or August, we should know, what types of, I guess it's still so up in the air. Like, we don't know. Are we doing this AM, PM? Are we doing something? Yeah, I guess once we know that, then, the logistics, that's why I was asking what Edgemont's doing and how this is going to work, and, what plans are in place for certain classes. Because I think a lot of us have the same types of questions, like, are they, that's why what Edgemont was doing.
Yeah.
I guess, are there any other schools that you know of that are doing something else that?
Yeah, so most schools, because they just got the guidance yesterday, don't have a significant number of plans hammered out. The two, they have conceptual, they have like big ideas, so Mamaroneck, for example, they have a different problem than most area high schools. Many area high schools have dwindling enrollment. Mamaroneck is exploding in terms of their enrollment. They don't have enough facilities on a good day for all of their students there. So they're going in the direction of an ABC model, because they can only accommodate 33% of their students at a time. We're not in that position, so I wouldn't be looking at that type of model. Byram has the opposite of Mamaroneck. They don't have enough kids in their school, and they have far many more classrooms than they need. So they might actually be able to pull off 100% in school, because they can spread the kids out over space that, we don't have and Mamaroneck doesn't have in their building. Scarsdale, they are still at the conceptual point where they have a few different models that they might consider. And I think they have a district leadership meeting this week. Many schools who participate with Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, we participate with Southern Westchester BOCES, engaged in something called a thought exchange last week, where you share ideas, about things like this, and then people rate those thoughts. I think there's probably 8 districts, John Jay, Brewster, Somers, Bedford, that are involved in that thought exchange project. That thought exchange doesn't close until tomorrow, so those school districts won't even start looking at the models until tomorrow. So I think we're still really in the preliminary stages. We had our first meeting as a cabinet earlier today. It was me, Peggy, Don, Mary, and we talked about it. Mary's going to share some initial thoughts from that meeting with the board tonight. And then what she's asked the principals to do is work together to develop a few proposals, based on some of the more concrete information that we have now, and some of the feedback that we have from families, which will then ultimately, go to her and go to the Board of Education for approval.
Now, so my question for you, Joe, is has this team from BOCES, did they offer anything in terms of engaging families? Did they offer any of that information, like what are other districts doing? And even within Pleasantville, what's Bedford Road doing and what's the middle school doing? And so we should all be doing the same thing.
So Southern Westchester BOCES, unfortunately, is not doing the same work that Northern Westchester BOCES is doing. Mm-hmm. And the dollar amount for us to purchase the thought exchange program on its own was prohibitive at the moment. So that's not something that we're doing now. It's something that Mary's looking at doing in the near future. So we hope to have that tool sometime soon. And I do know that Mary contacted Southern Westchester BOCES, and she was, just kind of didn't understand why they weren't doing similar work. What we did as a result of that was push out something, on our own from the district, that for parents in all 3 buildings, to get some feedback that we will now use as part of our planning process.
So what's your deadline in terms of, I'm sorry, Trish, what's your deadline in terms of when you're going to make a decision on if it's going to be an AM/PM model, if it's going to be one of these other models?
I'll come later to it now.
So our plan is due to the state, I think on July 30th. My experience when we have had plans due to the state for other things in the past is it's kind of like a choreographed dance that you do with a big bureaucratic agency. You submit a plan, they give you some feedback, they send it back, and then you make, some adjustments to your local plan. My thinking in terms of, when I will have a plan into Mary, today is July 14th. I got the guidance document 26 hours ago. I am going to work to get it done. I would hope by the 24th, maybe the 27th. That would be my hope. The biggest thing that I'm trying to figure out now is the piece that I mentioned earlier around cohorting. Like, what's the best model to make those groups? That's been something that I've been kind of struggling with. Yeah,
So
Trish.
that was one of the questions that was raised to me a lot over the weekend after the survey came out, was when the decision is made, is the decision going to be made for the high school, the middle school, and BRS to all function as one? Or is each individual, because there's a lot of there's a big difference between a 9th or a 10th grader or 11th grader to a kindergartner, first grader, second grader. So is this across the board, or is that still something that's up in the air for negotiation?
So I would say that the likelihood of the plan looking the same in each building, is probably completely the same, is probably slim. I think there are going to be foundational components that are similar in each building. I think that, certainly Mary has talked to us about keeping the schedules, aligned with one another. But in terms of the fine details of each program, Peggy's day may look a little bit different than mine, and mine may look, like, in terms of how it's organized when you're in school, may look a little bit different than Don's, because they have teams at the middle school, so their cohorting might be, I don't know. I can't speak for Don entirely, in terms of, if he's going to make the same decision about cohorting that I'll make at the high school. But we are committed to working together. I mean, that's obviously a big priority of ours.
So if the decision is made to go to the hybrid model where it would be an AM/PM session, just for, an example of an AM/PM session, does that mean that the middle school would also be AM/PM and BRS would also be AM?
Yeah, foundationally our plans would be similar, but there may be details within the plan that look a little different from building to building. Yeah, but I wouldn't go with, I'm saying this today, who knows what challenge Peggy runs into. But I don't see why we would do two different approaches in the same district. I can't understand why we would do that. I wouldn't advocate for that.
I wanted to just say that there was some confusion with parents that spoke to me about the question. First of all, everybody loved getting the questionnaire and having a chance to have their input on the survey. But there was confusion about the morning sessions. I think some parents may have thought that it would end up in an abbreviated day where you had very short academic sessions. So I do think that it's worth communicating with the parents sooner rather than later that a half day will not mean very short academic slots, that it would be, 3 1-hour slots, because that's a lot more appealing.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I will certainly, look into. The big question I have to get answered tomorrow from Steve Chamberlain is whether we can turn the building around.
Yes.
Because it just might not be feasible. So I'm very curious to hear what he says about that, which will allow us to make take some next steps in terms of our planning.
So is it definite, can this school handle 100% capacity at once or no, given the?
If we were to invite 100% of the students in, there's no way that I would be able to have anything close to 6 feet between any student in any classroom at any time.
Okay. So that's definitely off the table then.
Well, based on how I read the guidance document, it seems to me like the document suggests that you maintain 6 feet, and in those instances when you cannot, you use a mask. If I were to plan for 100%, I would be planning for the cannot 100% of the time, because in my smallest subscribed classes, I have more than 10 kids in every one of those classrooms.
Are any schools looking or at additional space anywhere or bringing in trailers, anything like that?
I haven't heard anything about trailers. We would certainly be open to using tents and outdoor spaces. That would be something that we would be able to do on days when there was good weather, on months when it worked. And certainly in that guidance document, the Department of Health talked a lot about community partnerships. So I do plan on reaching out, to the local churches and the Girl Scouts to see if there's, any availability in those spaces, which then would create custodial concerns, right? Because we'd have to get custodians over to those spaces. So there are a lot of moving parts, that we're kind of working on here.
Joe, can I ask you a question? So
Yeah.
I know I didn't read through that whole document, so maybe it was in there, but
You
I
didn't
didn't.
do the whole thing?
But
How dare you?
but you mentioned earlier in your comment that it would maybe be for a semester, or you're not sure. Is
Right.
there, in a similar way to the way that New York has the phases, that we've reopened, is there a possibility that we could gradually go back to full attendance in school if the numbers are dropping? And like, is there like a plan for that too? Like the phased going back to
Yeah, so I think
attendance?
there's absolutely the possibility that can happen, and then when we start to create the cohorts that we have, we should probably think about how we can make the cohorts a little bit larger over time, if we see positive results, so that we can start to scale back to having something, closer to, 100% of the students in the building. I mean, there's also the alternative that's true, right? Is you could end up having, a spike, in which case you may have to go, remote for a period of time. So Rosemary, that's a really good insight. I think on both sides of that equation, we've got to be prepared to be either less restrictive or more restrictive, based on whatever the world deals us in terms of an outcome, in September, October, November, December. One of the most common questions that I've been getting the last few weeks is around extracurriculars, and
I was going to ask you about that too.
yeah, what I've noticed in some states is that they've pushed off the start of any extracurriculars until late September. And I think that's a good move, because what that does is it gives you the opportunity to see what happens when you return, to determine, whether or not something like that is feasible, and then start a delayed, forensics or, field hockey season, later in the fall, as opposed to just saying we're not going to do it. I certainly don't want to take anything off the table, for students before we have to. And if we can't do what we've traditionally done, around athletics, I think then the question is, what could we be doing differently with those resources, right? Do we have, a robust intramural program? Do we do something with some local gyms where we can have activities, on the field? I had a group of students approach me a few times about an esports league that they'd like to launch at the school. What are some things that we could do, if we can't do the things that we've traditionally done to keep students active, engaged, connected with their peers, doing healthy activities. Those are things that we really need to think about.
So as you're talking about, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Physical education, is that going to be something that is still going to occur in school or no?
Yeah, so PE falls into that same category as band and chorus. So I'm thinking, that we'll probably, look at some different models for PE, whether we can do it outdoors, during the fall and in the spring, whether some of it happens remotely. Like, that's something we're going to look at a little bit differently. The governor did provide teachers with the ability to do some instruction outside of their certificate area, some flexibility that normally doesn't exist. Typically, you can only teach one class outside of your content area. This year, you could teach a few. So depending upon what we decide to do with our PE program, we may end up using some PE teachers in different ways during the day. Because that's one of the struggles, like if you think about a Byram Hills, and they talked about having 100% of their kids in, but then breaking them up into different classrooms. Even if we had the ability to do that, supervising those classrooms with those additional, groups that we now have would certainly be a bit of a challenge. If you, let's say split up an English class and sent 10 kids in one room and 10 kids in another room, unless you're in a co-taught classroom, you're going to need 2 teachers now for those 2 spaces. So I think that's a challenge that, some schools might run into if they have the square footage and they try to pull people in and then space them out, in a building. That's not a challenge we have because we don't have that space in our building right now. Our humanities classrooms and our world language classrooms are about, I'd say on average, 650 square feet. Our math and science are anywhere between 900 and 1,000 square feet. So, we're on a smaller side, certainly with our physical plant, in the building.
And in terms of the computers, is it 9th grade and 10th grade that will have computers this year?
Yeah, so this upcoming school year, grades 9 through 12, I just spoke with Cameron today, are going to have district issued laptops.
So every student 9 through 12?
Yeah, so students in grade 9 would have received it anyway when they entered the building. And then what we're going to do with students in grade 12 is we're going to use laptops that we had to use in classrooms. We're going to give those to students to start the school year, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we got those back so that we could do all the maintenance that we need to do to make sure that devices that we provide students with in the fall are all functioning well. And if they're not, we obviously do maintenance to them, during, July and August.
Do kids need training on the Schoology? Are you starting that?
Yes, you're on fire, Tammy. I love it.
Yeah, that was my question too.
So for Schoology, what I am looking to do is I'm looking to create a family training or a parent training and a student training. The family training would be for moms and dads, aunts and uncles, whomever is the guardian, of our students here in the building. And then obviously the student training would be like a tech boot camp, for our kids because it's a new platform. We did training with the faculty in May and June. We continue to do some of that training during the summer months, but we're looking to build some specific modules, for the other 2 parts of that equation. So I think it's so important that moms and dads, aunts and uncles, whomever the guardian might be, knows how to use that technology. And then obviously we train students to use it too. I think students will probably be the fastest to pick it up. And I think us adults will be a close second. So it'll be a good thing for us. And, we've done some hiring during the summer months, and it's been a relief to hear that some of the folks that we've brought in are very familiar with Schoology because it's a product that they've used, in the school they're coming from. So, that's something that makes me feel good about the decision that we made, around that product. And we made that decision before we started, the e-learning, before the pandemic hit. We just ended up running out of time as a result of the closure of school to introduce it, during the spring semester. So we did it with the faculty, and our next step is going to be with families and students.
Do you have any dates in mind for when or roundabout when you plan on doing that?
No, so I've got a meeting with Cameron Faggio on Thursday this week. And what he's going to do is we're going to kind of look at the calendar, come up with some plans. I'm thinking late August, early September. And then the other thing that I would like to do, kind of like we're doing with this meeting, is anything that we do, we will preserve, put it up into the cloud, and then we can maintain a database, of these types of trainings and those types of meetings, so that if somebody would like to access it on their own, they can do so on demand. Then if they're like me, they're kind of fast forwarding and rewinding to watch certain parts. I'm not great with Excel. So today I was doing some stuff with Excel and I watched an instructional video and I was amazed at how easy it was once I actually spent some time on it. So people will be able to use these videos in a similar way. And then the other thing is what we're looking to do, we've had a new hire or a few extra hires in our tech department. So we're looking to create a couple, slots for like a quote unquote genius hour, like you might have if you go to the Mac store, where both parents and students, can kind of go in, and if they have tech issues, virtually, they can meet up and get some assistance that way. That was one of the reasons why we moved our tech office to the library, because students just loved being able to access, all that tech support right there. But then, of course, school closed physically. So now we're looking to recreate that, during the afternoon and evening hours for students and families.
Joe,
Joe, oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Rosemary.
thanks. I just, so we talked about getting more input from parents, from other family members in the community, in the school. Are you thinking that we'll want to make up some more surveys to be distributed very soon? Because it sounds like you need to have a plan just in the next couple of weeks. So are we going to still try to get more input, or is this enough that you've gotten already to make the plan?
So I met with the wellness team right before I met with this team. And the wellness team is interested in developing a short questionnaire for families just around supports that we might put in place, during the summer months, and supports that will be ongoing during the school year. So they talked about developing, a short survey. In terms of our communication, I'll have a better idea tomorrow after Mary meets with the Board of Ed tonight, about our next steps, kind of district wide, with our plan. And I'll have a conversation with the 3 building principals, about what we want to do as far as, do we want to gather some more information, or do we want to just put 2 models out there at this point? I'm thinking that, for this committee, just some assistance around planning some August meetings, would be great in terms of looking to make contact with families and answer questions, for folks that I think are pretty natural based on all the uncertainty, that's out there in the world right now.
But I think we should also kind of maybe look to come up with some sort of solid plan, a communications plan.
Okay.
The other thing that I'm wondering too, I mean, are all families able to handle this technology at home? Did they handle this technology at home? Should we maybe be asking about that, so when they're, so we can prep them and have them ready for this hybrid model?
Yeah. And that could be a great component of that video, that training part, piece that we talked about a moment ago.
And also in terms of archiving anything that you do in an accessible place for families. I don't know what cloud you were talking about. Are you talking about the website? Because that's what families have access to right now. Or are you talking about Microsoft 365, which just the students have access to? Because it's hard, because there are so many different platforms for which families access information in the district, and also the students. So I think we kind of need to sort of look at all those things and decide, what are we going to use, and, what will be best for everybody.
Yeah, good idea.
So I don't know how you want to go about that.
But Schoology also is a way of everything's going to be kind of in one place.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask Cameron what he thinks might be the best, place for that to live. Like, do we start a district? Because I know that the high school has a YouTube channel that Joanne manages. Like, do we start a YouTube channel, where we have a library of those types of things, or do we park them somewhere specific on the website? Joanne, what do you think?
I thought, well, Schoology isn't accessible by parents. It's going to be similar to 365.
No, it is accessible by parents.
Yeah. So maybe even somewhere there.
Yeah, I think I might bounce off Cameron and see where he thinks like the best place for it to live. I mean, what I was gonna do this week is when I push out an update, I was gonna make that the kind of like the center link, so that folks could click on it and they'd be able to access all the videos, from this week, that we created. But I would be putting them on a YouTube channel that I maintain that has, different videos that I've used throughout the year with students. So I'll ask Cameron what he thinks about that.
Yeah, I'd like information on it earlier rather than later, just to, have it and start exploring if I wanted to, before it gets too close to school.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do then is I can work to start to, with Cameron when I meet with him, to start to develop that instructional video. Maybe we get it out, before July 1st or before August 1st. That can't hurt.
Now, the only people who have access then, as you were saying, parents have access to the Schoology. How are we given access to that? Is that?
So I believe that you'll have a username and a password. What I'll do is I'll double check that with Cameron, and obviously the sign-in component will be a primary piece of whatever instructional video we share with families. Yeah, because that's the question I have to ask him, and I've not used it in the past myself, so I'm not 100% familiar with the tool, but can parents access it in all the same ways before students actually create their accounts? That may end up being a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to talk to him about that.
Yeah, I would rather have it somewhere where it's easy for us to access, because I just find there, like Rachel was saying, there can be information all over the place. You're getting it in a blast, you're getting it, here, there, everywhere on the website, in an email from you. So it would be nice if there was a way that it was kind of just linked, to me somehow, and I'm able to, everything I would want and need is right there.
One-stop shopping.
There you go. I love it.
But that's what we discussed in the strategic plan with the communications, is to try to move to this type of platform so it would be more one-stop shopping and a little less fragmented than what it is now. And everything would be in one place where people could find all the information they need in one place. But then, of course, you still have to push information out through different channels, emails, social media, whatnot. So.
I was going to ask a question around Schoology. I haven't personally used it, but just kind of thinking about, is there a way to create like an internal family or parent central page? Like, for example, I know that like the school website has an internal page, right? That the teachers and the faculty will see that the parents won't see. So if we're going to Schoology, would we be able to do something like that for parents? So basically, every parent of a child in Pleasantville will have their access to that internal page that is not public, right? But in addition to receiving emails, I could, as a parent, I could potentially log in and see every resource and communication that is also sent through an email. Because not everyone check their emails every day, but if I can go into a central hub and I see all the communication, that could be something of useful to parents of use.
I just made a note of that. I'm going to have a conversation and see what that looks like. The feature that I'm thinking about that most closely resembles what I hear you talking about, Andrew, is been traditionally embedded in some websites that I've used in different school districts. And I don't know if Schoology behaves the same way, but I just made a note of that for myself. As part of my conversation, I'll look at that.
Because we have like Naviance and eSchool, which we can access as a parent.
Yep.
Yeah. And then also, what about students? Like, how can students communicate then with each other? For instance, we had something come up today, like, how can the class of 2021 officers say they want to say something to all their entire class? Can they do that through Schoology? Do they do that through a Remind? Do they, what's the best way for these kids to connect with each other? Especially in an online world. So, I know they love to do it. You can do it in Snapchat, you can do it in Instagram, TikTok, all those things, but not all kids are on social media or are part of their little groups within. Say there needs to be official communication between students.
That has to do with group email rights. I've had a conversation with that, whether that's something we'd want to do.
Yeah, too much power.
Well, like, you'll notice, like, when I send out a large group message, I'll always put it in the BCC field because I never want the message to get kind of hijacked, So that's kind of an interesting one. I made that mistake when I was at Brookfield High School. I emailed like the class of whatever. And then of course they were like sending funny messages, but I'll look at that and find out, through Schoology, if it's in groups by class or if you can go larger than the class, when you do that. And when I say I really mean if they're in groups by course, larger than.
Yeah, you can do that. Cause I know like Canvas, they'll allow you to do like an entire department, if you're, that kind of thing. And it's, professors all the way, students, everybody. So
yeah, I'll ask that question.
Okay.
So Joe, just a follow-up question, and maybe you already answered this. Schoology, what specifically is it replacing, or is it supplemental to what we already have in Pleasantville? And is Naviance still going to be something that we use in terms of college and career readiness for students? And yeah.
Well, so Naviance will absolutely remain on the table. And then as far as, Schoology goes and Microsoft 365, we are still going to be using the Microsoft Office suite, so you'll have all the email capabilities for our students. There are parts of Microsoft, like the Teams part with the videos, that work very well. So I think in the short term, there are probably going to be some components of Microsoft that we continue to use. But our goal, for this fall is going to be for the instructional piece, to be moving our, the content for each one of our courses to Schoology and not have it reside in Microsoft Teams.
Okay. So
but there may be an occasion where we decide to use a piece of it. That's something I would really like to talk to Cameron a little bit more to understand, because one of the things I haven't looked at, as closely as I'm going to, is the video function, on Teams, to make sure that it's as good as some of the other video functions that we have.
Okay. So essentially, Schoology will be the learning management system for
Right.
teachers and students and families as well, in terms of accessing and seeing the progress of their child.
Right. Yeah, I think, are you guys a Google Classroom where you are? What do you use?
We are, yeah, we use all Google products.
Right. Yeah.
There is a positive and a negative to that, but yeah, so our school, basically our website is built using the Google for Education platform, and then we have that internal site for teachers and faculty that we disseminate all kind of information, and then we so it's Google. We use a Google Meet, so we don't use Teams for our local school, but on the district level, we use Microsoft Teams for
Right.
more project management and higher level, district level meetings and these type of things.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we're definitely using a multitude of different applications, and you may not be able to just go to one application, but I guess kind of streamlining certain things is definitely makes it more efficient.
What school are you in?
So I'm with New York City,
DOE.
so I'm with DOE, yeah.
And you're not going back, right? You're fully learning? Or
So we are not sure. We're still waiting, just like, we're still waiting to see what's gonna happen.
3 days, 2 days.
Just like Pleasantville sent out a survey, the city did send out a survey to students, parents, and faculty. And similar to your results, some of the results were similar in terms of, I think we had 78% did want to return to the building, but trying to figure out what that's going to look like is a big challenge.
Yeah.
And there's some major concerns, just with returning and capacity and all of the safety measures for each building in the city, as you can imagine, is going to be a challenge. So we're still working through that as well. Yeah.
So if I were to look at the calendar for some meetings, Tammy, I heard what you said about grade level. Maybe would it make sense for that first week of July for me to have some initial grade level, or excuse me, first week of August for me to have some initial grade level meetings, like let's say Tuesday, Monday through Thursday, or Tuesday through, I wouldn't want to do Friday, let's say Monday through Thursday, to fill parents in and provide them with an update. Does that sound like a good idea?
But by then I know the plan has to be approved to the state, but
Well, by that time, I'll be able to say what we submitted. I'll be able to answer general questions. I'll also hope at that point, Tammy, to have that instructional piece for parents around Schoology developed. So that can be kind of a precursor to that. So I think there's good information that I can provide there. And if we do it that first week, I can also use that as a good opportunity for me to gather additional information to schedule, like, let's say, a subsequent round of meetings, either the week of the 10th or the 17th of August, in preparation for the beginning of September.
I
I think that's good.
idea.
I think it's a good idea.
And if I break it out by grade, I can ask the school counselor who's responsible for the specific, grade that she's assigned this year to be there too. So, I'm sure that the class of 2021 will have some specific questions, class of 2022, 23, 24, so on and so
The
forth.
only thing, guidance counselors aren't assigned by grade, though.
Yeah, they are.
I'm a student.
Yeah, so each one of the counselors, and you probably wouldn't know this on your end, each one of the counselors has a grade where they primarily kind of do like some grade level stuff during the year.
Oh,
So,
okay.
On my end, yeah. On your end, yeah, you wouldn't see it on your end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can ask that counselor to be there, and she can kind of, share, plans around the developmental curriculum and all that work, so that the parents are, have another good resource.
By then, you'll know about when the laptops would be distributed to the incoming freshmen.
Yep. Yeah. And to that end, I think it might have been Rachel who brought it up. We can also talk about maybe just like a boot camp, for someone who isn't even really concerned about Schoology. They just want to be able to open up the machine and be able to use it. So maybe we can develop some of those, activities as well, in addition to the Schoology.
And I mean, within the parent groups also, there might be some parents, who want to volunteer some time, who, would be willing to do a Zoom session if, just to have some expertise, if somebody, needed some help with something particular.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Joe, I was thinking too that during that time, it might be good, since they are going to be broken out the grade levels, to even use something like a peer deck where you can do easy polling. That could take just seconds. If you have those polls already instituted in like a peer deck or something like that, you could grab the data information there if you use something like that. So just an idea.
I've never used the polls on these Zoom meetings. Has anyone done that before?
Not on Zoom.
No.
Art Stages has used it before. The kids like it. Yeah.
I've only done it on Peer Deck.
Peer Deck. I'm going to look at the Zoom feature, and I'm going to look at Peer Deck. Yeah, I've never done it here before. We will see. Marianne Flatley, you've been quiet over there.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Does everybody know Marianne? Yeah?
I'm Marian Flatley, student assistance counselor for the high school and the middle school.
Nice. Have you heard from any students this summer?
No, I at the end of the year, I make referrals if need be, and I don't really continue to see students over the summer typically. So
okay.
It's an untraditional summer for everybody. So, I do have different meetings and things like that, but in terms of communicating with students, not as much.
Okay. All right. Well, I have some work that I'm going to do on my end, based on our conversation tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to update the document that had the details for our meeting, and I'll resend it, out to the group. I'm looking forward to some meetings the week of the August 3rd. I am going to investigate Peer Deck, and I'm going to play with the Zoom polling feature to kind of figure that out a little bit. And I'm hoping to get some information tomorrow from the different meetings that I have scheduled. And then what I'll do is I'll push out a meeting to the whole group. That's all 4 teams, just to let them know what type of progress I made tomorrow, where I am in terms of that deadline that someone asked about earlier today. And we'll continue to move forward and work to develop plans. We're gonna have a great school year. We're gonna make sure kids are safe. We're gonna get them together in a safe way as much as we can. We're gonna make sure they learn a lot and that they have a great experience. I know my daughter, who is typically the most reluctant student, has never been so excited about returning to school. She is so excited about it. So, I have a vested interest. I picked my family up. We moved here to Pleasantville. I want to get my kids in schools, with your sons and daughters as quickly as possible and in a safe way as we possibly can. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And if anything comes up afterwards and you'd like to talk, just shoot me an email and we'll touch base.
Can you send one email that just has all of us on it separately in case anybody wants to, shoot something back and forth?
Yeah.
Just so
And then
that
what
it's,
I'll do is I'll create 4 groups so that you guys can do that.
okay.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Have
All
a
right.
great night, everybody. Bye
Bye.
now.
Ciao. You too.
Thank you.
Right,
Good
thank
night.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Joe, you'll have something, you got my text that Jen wasn't able to make it?
Yes, I just saw that.
Okay. You said you are going to release the recording, so she'll be able to watch it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I
And then,
will. How's everything on your end?
okay, you know, the kids want to get back to school.
I know. Mike.
But,
All right. I
yeah.
will see you soon, Tammy. Have a great night.
Okay, you too. If you need anything, let me know.
I will. Bye now.
Okay, take care.